I am a 35-year-old business owner who met my wife Natalie at a charity event 5 years ago. Our marriage seemed perfect to everyone around us. My family insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect our generation's old business, and I thought nothing of it since Natalie and I were so in love. We agreed to wait on having children until my business expansion was complete, so when she announced her pregnancy, I was confused, but initially happy. Then I discovered the devastating truth behind her announcement. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how I handled the ultimate betrayal. My story begins with my family background. I come from a long line of successful entrepreneurs who built our manufacturing company from scratch 3 generations ago. By the time I took over operations from my father, we had expanded to international markets, and our net worth had grown substantially. With wealth comes certain cautions, something my parents had drilled into me from a young age. Howard, not everyone will love you. For who you are, my father would say. Some will only see dollar signs when they look at you. I had experienced this firsthand through my 20s. 3 serious relationships all ended when I discovered the women were more interested in weekend shopping sprees and access to vacation properties than building a life together. By 30, I had grown cautious about revealing my financial status too early in relationships. My family had always been protective of our assets. My grandfather had lost a significant portion of his early wealth to a divorce, and since then, prenuptial agreements were non-negotiable in our family. My parents had one, and they made it clear that I would need one too when the time came. I understood the business sense behind it, but part of me always hoped to find someone who made such precautions unnecessary. When I met Natalie, I truly believed she was different from anyone I had dated before. She had her own career, her own ambitions, and seemed completely uninterested in my family wealth. For the first time, I felt I had found someone who wanted me for me. The charity gala where we first met was for a children's hospital fundraiser. I was there representing our family business as a major donor, and Natalie was handling the marketing for the event. She approached me not to network or flatter, but to politely inform me that I was standing in front of a display that needed to be photographed. "Excuse me, but would you mind moving about 3 feet to your left? The photographer needs a clear shot of the donor wall," she said with professional directness. No fawning, no excessive smiling, just straightforward communication. I was immediately intrigued. Throughout the night, I kept finding reasons to talk with her, impressed by her intelligence and the passion she showed for her work. As a marketing executive for a major firm, she had built her own career from the ground up after putting herself through college. Our connection was immediate and deep. After exchanging numbers that night, we had our first date the following week, and within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. Natalie was beautiful, smart, and seemingly self-sufficient. She never asked about my income, seemed uncomfortable when I paid for expensive dinners, and insisted on splitting the check on many of our earlier dates. After a year of dating, I knew I wanted to marry her, but before proposing, I needed to have the difficult prenup conversation. One evening after dinner at my place, I brought up the subject as gently as I could. "Natalie, there is something important we need to discuss before we take the next step in our relationship." I began feeling unusually nervous. "That sounds serious," she replied, setting down her wine glass. "Is everything okay?" I explained about my family's business, the full extent of which she was still unaware, and our tradition of protecting those assets through legal agreements. I watched her face carefully as I spoke, fearing I might see the mask drop and the dollar signs appear in her eyes. "So you are saying your family requires a prenuptial agreement," she said slowly after I finished. "Yes," I admitted. "I know it is not the most romantic topic, but it is important for the business. Many people depend on its stability, not just my family." Natalie was quiet for several moments. I could see she was processing this information, and I held my breath, waiting for her response. "I have to admit it hurts a little to think about planning for a potential failure before we even start," she finally said. "But I understand why your family has this requirement. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it was messy. I get wanting to avoid that." Her response seemed mature and reasonable. She asked thoughtful questions about what the agreement would entail, and I explained the standard terms, as protection of premarital assets, the family business shares, and yes, an infidelity clause that would limit claims in case of cheating. Natalie seemed to take it all in stride. I am not marrying you for money, Howard. I have my own career and goals. If this gives your family peace of mind, then I can accept it. Over the next few months, we both consulted with separate attorneys to ensure the agreement was fair. Natalie negotiated some reasonable terms for herself, including provisions for support if we had children, which I readily agreed to. By the time we signed the documents, I felt even more confident in our relationship. Her practical approach to the whole process only made me love her more. We married in a beautiful but not overly extravagant ceremony, and our early years together seemed perfect. I continued growing the family business, expanding into new markets across Asia. Natalie advanced in her career as well, eventually becoming a senior marketing director at her firm. We had discussed children and agreed to wait until my business expansion was stable. Natalie seemed completely on board with this plan, focusing on her own career advancement in the meantime. We traveled together, renovated our home, and built what I thought was an unshakable foundation. Looking back, I can now see the warning signs that appeared in our third year of marriage. Natalie began taking more interest in luxury brands, frequently commenting on friends' vacation homes or new cars. She started staying late at work more often, sometimes coming home smelling of alcohol but claiming it was just client meetings. She made new friends at work that she was reluctant to introduce to me. But love can be blinding. I dismissed these changes as natural evolution in a relationship or stress from her increasing responsibilities at work. I trusted her completely, never imagining she could betray me in the worst possible way. The first clear signs that something was wrong came gradually, like a slow-moving storm you do not notice until you are caught in the downpour. Natalie became increasingly protective of her phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. When I would enter our home office while she was on her laptop, she would quickly change screens or close it entirely. Just work stuff, she would say with a dismissive wave. You know how clients are about confidentiality. Her explanation made sense, given her role in marketing, where she often worked with products before their public launch. Still, something felt off about her behavior. She began going out more frequently with colleagues whose names changed constantly, and her weekend work emergencies became surprisingly common. One night after she came home, particularly late, I finally voiced my concerns. Natalie, is everything okay between us? You seem distant lately. She looked startled by the question, then defensive. Everything is fine. I am just busy with the Johnson account. You know how it is when we are close to a product launch. I understand work pressure, but it feels like more than that. You are barely present, even when you are home. I pressed gently. Are you accusing me of something? She snapped her reaction, seeming disproportionate to my question. No, of course not. I just miss you, I said, backing down immediately. She softened slightly, coming over to give me a quick kiss. I miss you too. It is just a busy season. It will pass. I decided to trust her explanation to believe in our marriage. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and in the weeks that followed, I found myself paying closer attention to the inconsistencies in her stories and her increasingly erratic schedule. Then came the night that changed everything. We were having a rare dinner together at home when Natalie set down her fork and looked at me with an odd expression. Howard, I have something to tell you, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I am pregnant. The announcement hit me like a physical blow. We had been using protection consistently since we had agreed to wait on having children, and given how infrequent our intimate moments had become over the past months, the timing seemed impossible. Pregnant, I repeated, my mind racing to process this information. But we agreed to wait, and we have been careful. These things happen, she said with a shrug, not meeting my eyes. No method is 100% effective. I wanted to be happy. Part of me was happy at the thought of becoming a father, But the mathematician in me, the logical part that had helped me succeed in business, was already calculating probabilities and finding them severely lacking. "How far along are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "About 8 weeks," she replied. I nodded slowly, my mind traveling back 8 weeks, realizing we had been intimate exactly once during that period, and I distinctly remembered using protection. Something wasn't adding up. "Are you not happy?" she asked, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I am just surprised," I said carefully. "This is big news. We had a plan. Plans change, Howard. This is happening now. I thought you would be excited." I tried to match her expected reaction to push down the growing suspicion and doubt. "Of course I am excited. It is just unexpected." That night, as Natalie slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. The timing, her recent behavior, her defensive reaction to my questions, all pointed to a conclusion I did not want to face. But I needed to know the truth. The next day, I contacted a private investigator, recommended by my company's security team. I felt horrible doing it, like I was betraying our marriage vows simply by investigating. But the alternative was living with doubt and suspicion, which would poison our relationship just as surely. "I need discretion." I told the investigator, a former police detective named Frank. "If I am wrong about this, I never want my wife to know." I doubted her. "Understood," Frank replied. "Most clients who come to me hope I will not find anything. In my experience, though, intuition is usually right." Over the next 2 weeks, Frank followed. Natalie documented her movements and monitored who she met with. I went about my business trying to act normal, while feeling like my entire life was balanced on a knife edge. When Frank called to say he had completed his investigation, the grim tone of his voice told me everything before he shared a single detail. "I am sorry, Howard," he said, "but you need to see these." The photos he showed me that afternoon in a quiet corner of a cafe far from my office destroyed the last of my denial. There was Natalie entering a hotel with a man I recognized as James from her marketing team. More photos showed them at restaurants holding hands, kissing in his car. Frank had even managed to recover deleted text messages from a cloud backup messages that left no doubt about the nature and duration of their relationship. Based on the timeline from these messages, they have been involved for at least 7 months, Frank explained gently. And there are several explicit references to the pregnancy. I read one message that burned itself into my memory. "What are we going to do? H thinks it is his. I cannot tell him the truth." And James's reply, "Let him believe it. We will figure something out later." They were not only having an affair, but conspiring to trick me into raising another man's child. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically ill. I thanked Frank, paid him generously, and went home to plan my next move. I needed to confront Natalie, but I wanted to do it calmly, with all the evidence in hand. No matter how this ended, I would not let emotion override reason. 3 days later, when I knew Natalie would be home for the evening, I set up the confrontation. I had the photos, the text messages, and the prenuptial agreement all prepared in separate folders. "We need to talk," I said, when she walked in the door. Something in my tone must have alerted her, because her expression immediately became guarded. "About what?" "About your pregnancy. About James. About the lies," I said, calmly placing the folder of photos on the coffee table between us. She glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "I do not know what you are talking about. Please do not insult my intelligence on top of everything else, Natalie," I said, opening the folder and spreading out several of the most damning photos. 7 months of an affair. A pregnancy you are trying to pass off as mine. Text messages planning how to deceive me. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions, from shock to anger to calculation, before finally settling on something like defeat. She sank onto the couch. "How did you find out?" she asked quietly. "That does not matter," I replied. "What matters is that you were going to let me believe I was the father of your child when you knew it was James's." She was quiet for a long moment, before looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "What are you going to do? I am filing for divorce," I said firmly. The prenuptial agreement is very clear about infidelity. This seemed to snap her out of her momentary contrition. She sat up straighter, her expression hardening. "The prenup, Howard. I am pregnant. You cannot just throw me out because of a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, or saying something hurtful in an argument," I replied. This was a deliberate campaign of deception. "I want to revoke the prenup," she said suddenly, "for the sake of the baby. This child deserves a good life security." I was stunned by her audacity. "Revoke the prenup. That is not how legal contracts work, Natalie. And that child has a father, James." "James is not ready to be a father," she said dismissively. "You are established, successful. You could give this baby everything. Be a man, Howard. Step up and take responsibility." In that moment, I saw her clearly, for perhaps the first time. The woman I had loved, had built a life with, was capable of not just betraying me, but trying to manipulate me into raising another man's child while calling my masculinity into question if I refused. "The only responsibility I have right now is to myself," I said, standing up. "I want you out of this house by the end of the week. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings." Her face contorted with anger. "You cannot do this to me. To us, I will fight you on this. You signed the prenup with your own lawyer present," I reminded her. "You knew exactly what would happen in case of infidelity. There is nothing to fight." As I walked out of the room, leaving her surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and relief. The life I thought I had was gone, but at least now I knew the truth. That night, after confronting Natalie, was the longest of my life. I checked into a hotel, not wanting to stay under the same roof with her, and spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying our entire relationship in my mind. Every memory was now tainted, causing me to question what had been real and what had been an act. Had she ever truly loved me? Or had I just been a good provider, a stable option until something more exciting came along? Sleep evaded me entirely. By dawn, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, physically and emotionally exhausted. I called my oldest friend, Thomas. "Can you meet me for breakfast?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Howard, you sound terrible. What happened?" His concern was evident. "My marriage is over," I said simply. "I will explain when I see you." Over coffee and untouched food, I laid out the whole story for Thomas. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grim. "I knew something was off about her," he finally said when I finished. "The way she would change when it was just us guys around without you there. Little comments about your family's money." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. "Would you have believed me?" he countered gently. "You were so in love. Sometimes people have to discover these things for themselves." He was right, of course. I probably would have defended Natalie, maybe even created distance between us. Love truly can be blinding. Over the next few days, I spoke with my parents and sister, all of whom rallied around me with support. My father, normally stoic and business-focused, showed a rare moment of emotion. "Son, I am so sorry," he said, gripping my shoulder. "But you did the right thing. The hard thing, but the right thing." Meanwhile, Natalie was not accepting the end of our marriage quietly. Rather than leaving the house, as I had asked, she dug in her heels. She began calling me, constantly alternating between tearful pleas for forgiveness and vicious accusations. "I made one mistake," she cried during one call. "Are you really going to throw away 5 years because of one mistake?" When that approach did not work, she switched tactics. "You are overreacting," she said the next day. "Lots of couples work through affairs. You are just being stubborn and punitive." I maintained my distance, communicating only through brief factual texts about practical matters. This seemed to infuriate her, further escalating her behavior. She called my sister, spinning a story about how I had been cold and distant, driving her into another man's arms. She contacted my mother, playing on maternal instincts by focusing on the pregnancy and the future of her grandchild. To their credit, my family stood firm, knowing the full truth of the situation. When these approaches failed, Natalie took her campaign public. She began telling mutual friends that I was abandoning her during her pregnancy. She even called one of my biggest clients, suggesting that my personal instability might affect our business relationship. Fortunately, my reputation for integrity was strong enough to withstand these attempts at sabotage. Her most troubling move came when she showed up at my parents' home where I had been staying. "If you go through with this divorce, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man abandons his pregnant wife," she threatened loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Your precious family reputation will be ruined." It was becoming clear that Natalie would stop at nothing to either force me to take her back or extract maximum damage on her way out. I needed to regain control of the situation. It was time to consult my attorney. Margaret Hayes had handled my family's legal affairs for over 20 years. Her office exuded the same calm competence she did with its leather chairs and shelves of law books. "The prenuptial agreement is solid," Howard, she assured me, after reviewing the document and the evidence of infidelity. "We were very careful in its drafting. The infidelity clause is clear, and your evidence is substantial." "She is claiming she wants to revoke it," I explained. Margaret actually laughed, though not unkindly. "That is not how contracts work. She cannot unilaterally decide to nullify a legal agreement just because it no longer serves her interests." We discussed the strategy moving forward. Margaret advised documenting all of Natalie's harassment and threats, obtaining a restraining order, if necessary, and proceeding swiftly with the divorce filing. "What about the child?" I asked. "She keeps insisting I should take responsibility." "First, we will require a paternity test, though based on the evidence you have, the result seems clear," Margaret explained. "Once paternity is established as not yours, you will have no legal obligation to this child." The path forward was clear, but would not be easy. Margaret warned me that Natalie was likely to contest everything, dragging out proceedings as long as possible, in hopes I would settle just to be done with it. But I was prepared for the battle ahead. As predicted, when Natalie was formally served with divorce papers, citing her infidelity and the prenuptial agreement, she escalated again. This time she went nuclear. Late one evening, she appeared at my office just as I was preparing to leave. She looked different, dressed more conservatively than usual, projecting an image of the wronged wife. "This is your last chance, Howard," she said without preamble. "Drop this divorce, tear up the prenup, and we can work things out." "That is not going to happen, Natalie," I replied calmly. "Please respect that our marriage is over." Her expression hardened. "If you go through with this, I am going to tell all your clients that you are abandoning your unborn child. How do you think that will affect your precious business relationships?" This was the breaking point for me. After weeks of emotional manipulation threats and attempts to damage my reputation, something inside me hardened. I had tried to be fair to handle this with dignity, but it was clear Natalie would not stop. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, keeping my voice level but firm. "The child is not mine. We both know that. I have text messages between you and James, confirming it. If you continue these threats, I will be forced to make those messages public. How do you think that will affect your reputation and career?" She blanched visibly. "You would not dare." "I do not want to," I said honestly. "I have no desire to humiliate you publicly, but I will not be blackmailed or threatened. The prenup will be enforced. The divorce will proceed, and we will have a paternity test to definitively establish that I am not the father. And if I refuse the test," she challenged, "then the court will make its own conclusions, and those will not be in your favor." Margaret has already prepared the motion. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes as she realized her leverage was evaporating. She had been counting on my desire to avoid scandal, on my fundamental decency to manipulate me into accepting her terms. But she had pushed too far. "This is not over," she said as she turned to leave, but the threat sounded hollow. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The worst had happened. She had revealed the full extent of her willingness to destroy me, to get what she wanted, and I had survived. There was nothing left to fear. The legal proceedings that followed were exactly as difficult as Margaret had predicted, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The prenuptial agreement held firm against Natalie's attempts to contest it. The paternity test, which she finally agreed to under court order, confirmed what we already knew: the child was not mine. When the judge delivered the final ruling, enforcing all terms of the prenup, I felt no joy in victory, only relief that this chapter of my life was closing. Under the terms, Natalie received none of my family's business assets, no alimony, and only a small settlement that had been predetermined for a no-fault divorce, but substantially reduced due to the infidelity clause. The most surprising twist came in the aftermath. James, who had been conspicuously absent throughout the proceedings, apparently wanted nothing to do with Natalie. Once it became clear she would not have access to my wealth. According to mutual friends, he left both her and his unborn child, moving to another state to avoid responsibility. He told her the affair was just fun, that he never wanted a family. Thomas informed me over drinks months later. She tried to go after him for child support, but he is fighting it. The irony was painful even to me. Natalie had sacrificed a stable marriage for an affair with someone who abandoned her the moment things became difficult. She had lost everything gambling on the wrong man twice. My victory in court brought mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt vindicated that the legal system had recognized the validity of our agreement and the severity of her breaches of trust. On the other hand, there was a profound sadness in seeing the complete unraveling of someone I had once loved deeply. After the divorce was finalized, I threw myself into work as a way to process my emotions. The business thrived under my focused attention, expanding into new markets and launching innovative product lines. Financial success, however, did little to heal the deeper wounds of betrayal. 6 months after the divorce, at the urging of my sister, I began seeing a therapist. Dr. Winters specialized in helping people recover from relationship trauma, and our weekly sessions became an anchor in my healing process. "What you are experiencing is similar to grief," she explained during one session. "You are not just mourning the end of your marriage, but the death of the future you had envisioned and the person you thought your wife was." Through therapy, I began to understand that Natalie's betrayal was not a reflection on me or my worth. I had been a good husband, committed and honest. Her choices were about her own character flaws, not my inadequacies. "Trust is like a muscle," Dr. Winters told me. "Right now it is injured and weak. But with proper care and exercise, it can become strong again, maybe even stronger than before, because you will be more discerning about who you trust." Gradually, I rebuilt my confidence in my own judgment. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, strengthened bonds with my family, and even began mentoring young entrepreneurs through a local business incubator. Helping others with their business challenges gave me perspective on my own problems and a sense of purpose beyond my personal pain. One of the most unexpected outcomes of this difficult period was the deepening of my relationship with my father. He had always been somewhat distant, focused on business rather than emotions. But watching me navigate this crisis seemed to open something in him. "I was wrong to only teach you about business success," he told me during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. "I should have talked more about building a good life, about finding people with integrity. I thought the prenup would protect you financially, but I never prepared you for the emotional cost of choosing the wrong partner." His vulnerability allowed me to see him not just as my father and business mentor, but as a man who had faced his own struggles and made his own mistakes. This new dimension to our relationship became one of the unexpected gifts from an otherwise painful experience. As the 1-year anniversary of my divorce approached, I found myself in a much healthier place emotionally. The anger that had once consumed me had largely dissipated, replaced by a measured caution about relationships, but not a complete closing off from connection. Through a business associate, I learned that Natalie had given birth to a healthy baby boy and was struggling financially. James was paying minimal child support, and her career had suffered after several of her clients learned about her attempted manipulation of me. For a moment, I considered reaching out to offer help for the child's sake, but ultimately decided against it. Some chapters needed to remain closed. Instead, I channeled that impulse toward generosity in other directions, establishing a scholarship fund for students from single-parent homes and increasing my company's charitable giving. Finding purpose in helping others became an essential part of my healing process. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter of my life was the importance of self-respect and maintaining firm boundaries. By standing my ground against Natalie's manipulation and threats, I had not only protected myself financially, but preserved my dignity and integrity. I also gained a deeper appreciation for the value of proper legal protection. The prenuptial agreement that had once seemed like an unromantic formality had saved me from potentially devastating financial exploitation. In business and in life, hope for the best, but prepare for challenges, became my new philosophy. Perhaps most importantly, I learned the strength that comes from vulnerability. By allowing myself to fully experience the pain of betrayal, by seeking help when I needed it, I found a resilience I never knew I possessed. There was freedom in acknowledging hurt rather than suppressing it. The peace that eventually came was not from forgetting what happened, or from any sense of revenge, but from making the difficult decisions necessary to protect myself and move forward. Sometimes the hardest choice is the only one that leads to healing. Have you ever experienced betrayal in a relationship? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Consider subscribing for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, please share it with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even after the deepest betrayals, healing and growth are possible.